Hi, I'm Pat Brennan.
And I'm Dylan Brennan.
We're the authors of a new series called Gettysburg in Color, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. Volume 1 and Volume 2, which cover the battle, are out now. Volume 3 will cover the battlefield from 1863 to 1938, the 75th anniversary of the battle. We're here today to talk about how we created this work, everything we did technically, creatively, and at the end of our demonstration, we're going to take questions. So thanks for showing up, and here we go. First of all, I've written a number of books on the Civil War, and I've written a lot for different Civil War journals, North and South, Blue and Gray. I'm presently on the advisory board for Civil War Monitor, and I got an idea about 5 years ago that a book about the Battle of Gettysburg, which was heavy on images, would be a good idea if all the images were in color. And I went to my daughter here, Dylan, and I said, hey, do you want to get involved in this? What did you think when I said, Dylan, let's do a book together?
Well, first it was, hey, do you know how to use Photoshop? Because I'm trying to colorize all these photos, and can you teach me how to use Photoshop? And then I was like, just send them over to me, it's fine, and then I'll do it. Expecting about 6 photos, and then it was more than that. So yeah.
You're saying I tricked you into this? Mm-hmm. It ended up you did about 100 portraits, I think it was.
Yeah, I lost track.
What we decided to do, besides the action, which had its own set of problems, we wanted to do portraits of all the officers who were at the battle, down to brigade level. I think there's only 3 that we didn't get. And one of the things that people have been talking about with this particular series is how we used AI and a piece of software called Deoldify, which is a software that looks at black and white photos and tries to figure out what the colors were. And the fact is that we didn't really use it for the entire thing, right? For instance, the portraits that she did, you came up with a whole different technique for getting the proper flesh colors. And tell people how you did that.
Yes, a lot of references. The color AI was more of like a palette. Like, this is what we think it is, so here's like a reference. I used a lot of different references from the internet. Oftentimes I would look at what the portrait was. I would try and find pictures of people who looked similar to those people in the portraits, to see what their skin color was and their eye colors and hair colors. So I'd reference them like that. I used a website that would generate faces without any sort of exterior lighting. So not like when you take pictures outside or something, you've got like the sunlight. It was basically a website that would create a face without any kind of extra lighting on it. So it was a very just like basic skin tone to pull from. So did that a lot too.
One of the sources that we had was Larry Tagg, the bass player from a great band called Bourgeois Tagg, who has done a number of books on the Civil War. And one of the really cool books he did was on the generals of Gettysburg, and that included physical descriptions of everybody, their eye color, was their skin ruddy, was their skin pale, and that sort of thing. We also did some research, of course, and looked for other physical descriptions of some of these soldiers, and we would find them. And Dylan and I would discuss it. I'd say, "Oh, we got John Gibbon here. He had blue eyes or something like that." So we were able to build up this portfolio of skin color, hair color, eye color, and come pretty close to at least what we think they came close to what they look like. You know, we aren't arguing that this is the do-all, end-all. I'm sure software is going to get better, and but for right now, for the software that is available, we're right there on the bleeding edge of what's going on. One of the things we both agree on, we wanted to have a narrative form to tell the story. I didn't want to do footnotes. I had no interest in doing a study of Gettysburg with footnotes that were. I used a ton of sources to tell the story, but we only told it down to a brigade level. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that was because we wanted the emphasis to be on the pictures, on the images, but we didn't want it to be the sort of detailed study that would take up a lot of space, so it could only go down to brigade level. And I think what I wanted to do was do a kind of Shelby Foote approach to the battle. Tell it as a story. I have lots of friends that are licensed battlefield guides and are experts on the battle, and I know that I can't compete with their knowledge. I have a really strong understanding of the battle, but I can't go down into the weeds with those guys, and so I didn't try to. And so we had this narrative that tries to tell the story in a colorful, interesting, exciting way, and not worry too much about the really detailed approaches that you can find anywhere else. There's books that, as you know, that cover the wheat field, that cover Little Round Top, that cover the peach orchard, that cover first day, second day, third day. You can go read those books if you want that sort of thing. With these books, it's more of a story, and it's in the images that we think the real excitement is. Another important part of the book that we worked on were the maps. I had the idea that we would use Google Earth, what the battlefield looks like today, take away the modern encumbrances, recreate the forests as best that we could, and then to put the troop movements on that. So I contacted my son, Kevin Brennan, and asked him to prepare these Google Earth images of the different parts of the battlefield and to clean them up. Once he did that, I came to Dylan, and let's say Kevin did like the broad work, and then Dylan came in and started working really hard on the smaller details. And one of the things that he came up with was the troops themselves, the Union and Confederate troops, and the insignias for the officers. So let's talk about the troops first. How did you come up with them?
So the troops are actually little hats. They're little red and blue hats, and then the bill of the hat is pointing towards where they're moving. Those were the main illustrated assets on the map, because everything else was taken from like a real texture. We used wood and gold images to create the cameras. The cameras actually look like how the cameras did back then. We created shoulder straps for each of the different officers so that we could put their names in there. Everything was just very real, especially because the Google Maps already were photographic, so we didn't want it to be too crazy or illustrated. Mm-hmm. We wanted everything to look like it could all belong in the same image together. So
talk too about the compass point that you used to direct the troops.
Yes, all of the arrows on the maps are made from compass pieces. So it's the arrowhead of the compass is sort of the gold metal that's leading all of the people around.
So the maps actually are using material of the time
Yes.
rather than looks like an illustration or something. It actually looks like something, and plus they're 3D too, which is very cool.
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of the feeling of you could create them with things that you find in your closet.
One of the big problems we had was portraying battle action. Photography at the time demanded that you expose the glass plate for 7 seconds at least to capture an image. Of course, the problem with that is that anyone who's moving during those 7 seconds looks like a blur. So there's famously no photographs of Civil War battle action. It would also be pretty dangerous for a photographer to be out in the middle of a battle with this contraption, which was a large piece of machinery to try to capture a photo. So what we had to do is go through and look in regimentals, look in old magazines like Frank Leslie's, any place we could find line drawings of the battles. And I came up with a technique to color these line drawings, which were similar to coloring the photographs, but at the same time much different. That allowed us to use a lot more different types of images. We also licensed artwork from museums, from Dale Gallen, from Don Troiani, from a lot of really, really great artists, so that we would try to cover every part of the battle that we could. And there was maybe only 1 or 2 parts of the battle that we didn't have images for, which was kind of interesting that we could find that many images. So a lot of the images in the book have appeared in black and white in books as line drawings, and we've turned them into color pictures. And the way we did that was by researching it. For this particular unit in the battle picture, the 40th New York had a certain type of blue color to their uniforms. Well, then we reproduced that blue color with the landscapes, the different kind of rocks, the different kind of grass. We would research that, get photos of that, and sample the color, and then transfer that color onto the different images that we had. Another artist who added a lot to the book was Dennis Morris, who has come up with a concept called Digraphs, which is a combination of photographs and dioramas. And he has done a lot of work on the second day battle. Parts of the battle that there's no other imagery for. No one's drawn the stuff, or no one has tried to reproduce it as an image in a regimental or something like that. And Dennis very nicely let us use all of his digraphs. And I encourage you to go to his website and check them out, because they're really spectacular. And I think they really brought something to the book. I know people, like when the first time you saw a digraph, what did you think of that? Because it was a very unique looking thing.
Yeah, kind of like when you go to a museum and you see all the sets.
The dioramas.
Yeah, it's kind of like making miniatures for films.
I know our publisher, the first time he saw it, he was like, "What is that? I don't understand what this is. What am I looking at?" Ted Savas, of course, with Savas Beatty, is the publisher that's putting these out. And we worked with him a lot on this, going back and forth about what the book would look like. And actually everyone at Savas Beatty, his whole crew there is fantastic to work with. And the woman who edited the book, Veronica Kane, who's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, so we kind of have to feel sorry for her these days because the Steelers aren't doing too well. But she's a fantastic editor, and she did a lot of great stuff on this. Another challenge we had was coming up with a layout for the book. This was a unique book for Savas Beatty to put together. It'd be a unique book for anybody to put together because there were so many images, so many different sized images. And something we also did with the images was the captions have a lot of information. When we would have like an officer in his image would come up, we'd give a rundown of what he did before the war, where he was from, and what he did during the war. So there's a lot of information in the captions. And Ian Hughes, who laid this book out, was really fantastic, going back and forth. He would say, maybe we should try this, try that. I gave him ideas. Dylan gave him ideas. Ted gave him ideas. And he was able to take all that stuff and put it together in something that I think is really unique and came out really well. Now, I wrote a book called Secessionville Assault on Charleston that came out in 1996. So I've been through something like this. It's really exciting when something you've been working on for a long time finally comes out to the public and the public starts reacting to it. What have you found fun about it? This is your first book, right?
Yes, not something I was expecting to have on my resume, but fun surprise. Everyone that I've told about it is very excited about it. Lots of requests for books. Everyone gets a kick out of how many signatures we've had to sign as well, which is a fun bonus. Also not something I was expecting, but it's been great. It's been very fun.
You know, it's kind of interesting too, in the Secessionville book, in the introduction for it, I talk about your birth.
Yes.
Because you were known in certain quarters as the Secessionville baby. Dylan was supposed to be born on July 2nd, the second day at Gettysburg. And she came early in 1995. And she was born on the day of the Battle of the Secessionville. And I wrote that in the introduction, and when I went around the country giving speeches, people would come up to me and they'd ask, how's the Secessionville baby doing?
She was fated to continue on with the Civil War.
But isn't it interesting that it should have been you were supposed to be born on July 2nd.
And that would have been better PR for this book.
Yes, so maybe we should say that, oh yes, and Dylan, who was supposed to be born on July 2nd.
Scheduled to be a Gettysburg baby.
Ended up being a Secessionville
Doomed
baby.
to be a Secessionville baby.
Yeah, it has been a really, really interesting, exciting thing to work on a book this closely with your daughter.
Yes.
With the family.
Lots of family bonding time.
Yes, we've been able to grow much closer as a family. Of course, I'm saying that as being humorous because we've always been very close. As a matter of fact, you went to Gettysburg with me.
Yes, in 6th grade.
And what did you think of that?
Hot. It was hot out.
What do you remember about the battlefield?
I remember you bringing the portable DVD player to line up with the different various parts of the battlefield and sitting in like 98-degree heat watching a very small DVD version of Gettysburg.
Yeah, the movie Gettysburg.
Yes.
We were especially on Little Round Top. And Kevin, who worked on the maps, got up on a rock and pretended that he was Joshua Chamberlain for a second, and then he fell off the rock. That's what I remember.
He was probably in 4th grade.
But that was early. What were your thoughts about your father being so interested in the Civil War?
My only thought was that sometimes it felt like I had multiple history classes in a day. I would go to school and I would learn about the Civil War, and then I'd come home and you'd have a bunch of battle maps out on the dining room table. So double the social studies class.
What grades did you get in history?
Fine grades. Probably solid B's in history.
Solid B's.
Yeah.
Now, volume 3 that we're working on now is going to be the battlefield after the battle. It's going to cover the development of the National Cemetery, the origins of the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association, leading to the Army taking over the battlefield in the 1890s, and then continuing on for the National Park taking it over. And a lot of it is about the veterans coming back to the battlefield, which is really some extraordinary stuff, because you see these men who fought at Gettysburg or who fought in the Civil War are coming back and basically hanging out with other people that fought in the war or at the battle, and talking to them, hanging out with them, walking around the battlefield with them, and then going in this massive tent that seated 15,000 people and listening to speeches, including a speech from Woodrow Wilson, who was president. That's in the 50th anniversary. 75th, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke at, and they lit the eternal flame on Oak Hill. And we're doing that to 1938 because in 1938 color film started up, and if you want to see pictures of Gettysburg from 1938 on in color, you can actually see real color photos of the battlefield. So we've been applying the same techniques that we learned covering the battle to how the battlefield developed afterwards. You're going to see photos of the crews working on the roads. You're going to see the monument dedications. You're going to see famous people coming and visiting the battlefield. And you're also going to see the battlefield as it changes. Some of the photos are of the battlefield right after the battle. Some are from the battlefield 75 years later, and the battlefield looks much different at different points in its development. Another interesting thing to see, especially as the monuments are being dedicated, is that you're seeing parts of the battlefield as they looked 25 years after the battle, and which look very different now. So you get a different look at parts of the battlefield, especially Seminary Ridge and Oak Ridge. Those seem to be the areas that have changed the most, where there was major battles, but because of modern encumbrances or modern development, you can't see the same images anymore. So that's one of the interesting things about working on this volume 3 that I think readers are really, really, really going to enjoy. One of the last things I want to talk about before we go is clouds, believe it or not. Many of the landscape shots that we did has a sky that's been whited out by the photographer for one reason or another. Clouds moving in the sky, photographers didn't like that. So they tended to get rid of the sky completely. So with these landscapes, the sky ends up being like 30-40% of the shot, and so 30-40% of the shot was just this white thing. So we had to work on creating natural looking skies. We had to come up with some techniques to do that, and the techniques ended up working pretty well. You'll notice that all the landscapes have blue or cloudy skies, and of course one of the things that I had to do was look hard at these photos and try to figure out what time of the day it was, depending on what the shadows were doing. And if there were strong shadows, then we had to make the sky so that it seemed like it was a sunny day. If there weren't any shadows at all, it had to be a cloudy day. A lot of the photos obviously have rain in them too, or it has just rained, or it looks like it's about to rain. And so we had to come up with cloudy skies too, and that was a completely different challenge than doing a sunny sky with blue sky. And I think after we did a lot of messing around with these different types of techniques, we came up with a couple that worked really well. So you'll notice that a lot of these photos, part of what makes them so realistic and seem like they were taken just recently is because we worked hard not only on the landscape and getting the greens and the browns and getting all that stuff right, but also getting the sky right too. And I think that that's something that probably no one's ever done with these photos before, but it made these photos look a lot more contemporary. Another thing we did was clean them up. These photos are 160 years old. There's a lot of dirt on them. There's anomalies. They are a chemical process, and the chemical process, when you blow them up and look very closely, you can see a lot of inconsistencies and scratches, and we would spend hours making these photos look as clean as we possibly could. So in many of these cases, in most of the cases, these are the best these photos have ever looked, just because we've spent so much time getting rid of the anomalies and the dirt and the scratches and everything and turning them into what it looked like contemporary photos. And I think that helps too, because there's a psychological thing that happens when you look at a photo that doesn't have those anomalies, it doesn't have those scratches. They look like they were just taken. They look modern, they look contemporary. And that's something we try to, every single photo that's in this book has been worked on like that. Even some of the paintings that we got, the Rothermel paintings that we got from Pennsylvania, they haven't been, there hasn't been an art curator who's worked on them and cleaned them up and everything. I ended up doing a lot of work on making those paintings look better. It's I don't want to brag, but yeah, I guess I am bragging, aren't I?
Art restoration.
Art restoration.
New title.
I'm an author and art restorer. So the big question, Dylan, is do you want to do it again?
Sure. With some more time.
We are in discussions already with Ted Savas about doing the Battle of Antietam, which is only one day. So it's not going to be quite as large a project. But it will involve a lot of images, a lot of portraits. And, you up for it?
Sure. I'll be even better now after all that practice.
So thank you very much for tuning in and listening to this presentation. We're going to wrap it up now, but I'm going to be taking questions in real time. So stick around, give us your questions, and we'll be right with you. Thanks.